Hi, welcome to Conversations with Hannah. Today I am joined by two women who have done a lot for our community to talk about their seeking office at the moment. So welcome Erin Boucher, who's running for school committee, and Michelle Conlin, who's running for the Board of Selectmen, soon hopefully to be the select board if we can get the town meeting to agree and legislation passed. I'm very grateful that you could both be here today, and thought, even though we're now in April, thought we could talk for a few minutes about Women's History Month, which was the month of March. Something I know that I always look forward to, even though I hate having like 1 month devoted to women's history. At least it raises, the awareness of folks to have that conversation. And I thought that I would update you both on something that I know we've talked about before, but legislation that I had filed to create a women's rights history trail here in the Commonwealth. I actually filed it because one of my colleagues had previously filed it, Rep. Galen Caridi. She and I had parking spaces next to each other, and she sadly passed away from cancer a few years ago. And so I loved it when she filed it, and I wanted to get it across the finish line. So very happy that both the House and the Senate have voted on it in the last couple weeks. And so has one more round of voting to go, and then it will go to the governor. And I do know that he will sign it. That is a conversation. The Lieutenant Governor is very excited and looking forward to doing an event with it as well. But I've always been concerned that enough people don't understand the role that women have had in sort of forming our nation, and then truly in the struggle for women's rights, the right to vote, and the ongoing issues to ensure that women have every opportunity in life. And I don't know what your families were like, but growing up, I had two brothers, and I never sensed anywhere that my life was limited by the fact that I was a woman. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was the same. Yeah. And I look back now, and that was my grandparents as well. Like, I just never felt any different, and there wasn't any opportunity that wasn't open to me. But that's not the case in a lot of places, and a lot of times it's because of what you read and see, and if you don't see role models in things, you don't know it's open to you. Yeah, absolutely. And two things from me, and then I'd love to hear what sort of inspired you as a woman thinking about running for office. But growing up, Margaret Chase Smith I was from Maine. She was the first woman to serve in the House and the Senate and U.S. Senate. And she was a moderate Republican. She broke rank a lot of times for the party when she didn't agree with them. She was the first person to stand in the well of the Senate and call out Joseph McCarthy for what he was up to. And so it just, a trailblazer, and a woman who felt very confident in her own skin, despite the fact that she was serving in a time starting in the 40s when women did not serve in these roles. Yeah. So she was one of sort of my just women I looked to with a lot of gratitude. And the other there was this book that I read. This isn't my original copy, but I've a newer version of it. But it was all about women, basically, who had done things they shouldn't have done, largely, back in the time around the Revolutionary War up through the Civil War. And there was a woman in here, her name was Deborah Sampson. She was actually from Massachusetts. She was declared a spinster by her mother, age 21, because she wasn't married and didn't have a family. And she was so aggravated and so interested in helping this nation fight for freedom that she sewed her own army uniform, disguised herself as a man, and enrolled and fought alongside men, and was only discovered that she was a woman. There was some type of epidemic that was going through, and she got sick and was down and out, and they were treating her and realized she was a woman. And she actually got honorably discharged because her service had been so compelling. I mean, she'd been fighting.
And so exemplary.
Yeah. And I always thought that was like the coolest thing, like that she did that. And, so fortunately in Massachusetts, there is actually, there are some statues to her, but overall in the country, the Smithsonian did a study a while back, and there was something at the time, like 5,500 statues in the country, and like 350 were for women. And just, sort of, if you don't start acknowledging and showing tribute, it's not just for the young women today either to see role models and to see what, women of the past, went through for our behalf and our opportunity today, but it's also for the young men too.
Yes. Absolutely.
So that they see that. Yeah. So I don't know if you had any particular people in your lives that influenced you in terms of thinking about running or showing up in the world.
So I come from a big family, and when growing up, my grandmother was always the matriarch of the family, and she just was this woman that knew what she wanted in her life, and she always fought for it, and she fought for her family and for her community, and regardless of what rules society tried to place on her, she always moved forward with what she knew was right and what she knew she wanted, and never let anybody stop her. And she was just an incredible woman. She had 6 children, 5 of them were boys, and she really raised her boys to know what a strong woman was. And growing up with her as a role model, like, really just kind of shaped who I am today. And my sister and I always talk about, we want to be like our grandmother and her sister when we're old ladies. We want to like have leave the legacy that they left behind for their families, and just really lucky to have that, and not growing up, like, not being afraid to show my voice and to speak my truth. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Erin, anyone in your...
Similar, both grandmothers were very inspirational as well. My dad's father died when he was young, when he was about 12, and my grandmother was raising 5 kids by herself, in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where she had to just go to work, when that probably wasn't her anticipated path when she got married, and relied on her mother-in-law and father-in-law, who were immigrants from Ireland, to come and kind of help with the family and help raise the 5 young children, and just always felt very inspired and so lucky to have such a strong female influence in my life as well. So I can totally relate to your story, Michelle.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think there are so many women and places in Massachusetts that were important to the right for women's rights, but again, also women who helped our country gain our independence and move forward. I mean, and certainly there are notable ones like Abigail Adams, but there's also a lot of women that made key contributions that aren't as well known here in the Commonwealth. And so part of this Women's Rights History Trail is to pull those out. And it's also a partnership with municipalities to say, sort of what's in your community, what has been notable. And so the trail will be, in a sense, virtual, meaning like you don't literally have to follow the trail around the Commonwealth, but it will say, here in the Commonwealth are all places where you might want to go visit, or you might want to know that there was something critical. In Worcester, the first 2 national conventions for women were held in Brindley Hall in the 1850s. And I lived here a long time before I knew that. And I was thinking, how did I not know that was where? And so, again, part of this will also be educational, for the schools. They can have this as an opportunity, a learning piece. So I'm very hopeful that sometime within the next month or 2, this will get across the finish line. We'll be able to celebrate it.
That's incredible.
And part of the reason that I feel it's so important to talk about women running and serving in office is because women just generally don't put themselves out there to run. The statistic, and I've said it on this show before, is you generally have to ask a woman 7 times to consider running before she'll even think about it. And you ask a man never, because of course they're qualified and they should run, and we women should have more of that sort of perspective. But the reality is, women have generally done a lot of things in their community or in work experience that give great skills and background to serving in office. On the state level, when I was elected, I was the 192nd woman elected to the legislature, and there's over 20,000 men.
Wow.
We're only at number 221 right now of women. Wow. So, there's definitely an imbalance. Women are the majority of people who live here in the Commonwealth. And there are lots of different barriers that we need to break down. Gender is one of them. There are others as well. But I'm always thrilled when I see women doing great work in our community and then making the decision to translate that good work that they've done into serving on an elected board. So I'm really happy that both of you have stepped forward and put your hats in the ring to run this year, and would love to just sort of learn more about, sort of what compelled you to make this decision to run, and more about what you've done in the community, the things that are important. So Michelle, why don't we start with you? Tell us like a little bit about yourself and how you made this decision.
Yeah, so my involvement in the community really started with the schools, when my children entered the schools. I've always felt an obligation throughout my life that if I want to live in a nice community and live in a nice world, I need to be part of that. And I need to be part of like the change that I want to see. And so when, I volunteered for the Blackstone River Coalition for 7 years. And when I was in my 20s, taking water samples one Saturday a month for 7 years, I would be out and taking water samples. And when I became a mom and the schedule didn't really work with that anymore, I left that volunteer position and I got involved in our PTOs. And it was one of our PTO meetings that, at that point we were talking about, building a new school, building the new Beale School. And we were talking about budgets, and the 2014 override had just passed, and having the school committee members come to our PTO meeting and talking about, we're in a really great position right now, but when we look down the line, at some point we're not going to be in a great position anymore. And realizing that, there is a very small demographic that sort of represents our entire community with town meeting and on the board of selectmen, the school committee. It's like it's this very small group of people that make really big decisions for our community. And I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be a voice for our community that, maybe was different than other voices. And I decided to run for town meeting in 2018. And I just found it fascinating. And, it's so easy for people to get upset about what happens at the national level, and political things that are happening. But what happens in your town hall is so incredibly important. It has such an incredible effect on your life and the way you experience your community. And, I love, going to town meeting, reading the Warren articles and seeing things that, people are really passionate about, that people are working hard to make changes in our community for the better. And it's so important because it truly does have like such an immediate, incredible impact on our lives on every aspect.
It really does. And, it's sort of the inverse happens is the majority of people who come out to vote in a presidential election because they think that's like fulfilling their duty to vote, then don't turn around and vote in a local election a lot. And again, those are very consequential, every day impacting you, certainly as a taxpayer, as a member of a community. And I think that, fortunately on the local level, we have and state level in Massachusetts, we have a much better tone and tenor to the conversations. And it's really that, there are a lot of people who have a ton of goodwill for the community who might come at different policy decisions differently, but they're doing it out of the best interests of the community. And that's what you want. Like you want to hear all diverse voices, and then you want to, as a community, come together. And that was one of the first ways that I served, was starting as a town meeting member, I think back in 2002. And I love being a member of town meeting because I love to hear what are the things that people are thinking about in our community. And I know one of the things that you had also worked with us on, because I think you have a family connection as well, was our effort to build the new police station and the new emergency communication system.
Yes, yeah. So I grew up, I have a grandfather that was a firefighter, and when he became disabled, he became the dispatcher. And my mom stayed home with us when we were really little, and then when we were in school, she started working at the fire station. Yeah. So I grew up in the firehouse in my hometown, and I have an uncle that is a retired police officer, and my stepfather worked at the police station in my hometown, and just really near and dear to my heart, understanding how important public safety is in our community. I was thrilled to see, a new centralized dispatch station coming to our town. I actually just met a few weeks ago with the fire chief and talking about, different issues and changes that are happening at the fire station, and but talking about our emergency response system. And, our system was so old that they couldn't even get replacement parts to repair things anymore. And, I'm really glad that our town decided to make that investment in our community, because that is something that impacts every single person in this community.
Yeah.
You want to be able to pick up the phone and call 911 if you have an emergency and know that that ambulance is going to be there, that those fire trucks are going to be there, that those police officers are going to be there, because, that really, that impacts every single member of this community.
Well, and their safety is paramount as well.
Absolutely.
Making sure that. So thank you for your work on that. And Erin, I know that you too have a building project that you were part of, and that you got to see my husband quite often.
I certainly did. Yes.
But tell us a little bit about your background and what compelled you to run.
So I moved to Shrewsbury about 10 years ago. I have 2 children in the school district. I have a 10th grader at Shrewsbury High School and a 7th grader at Oak. I got involved. I also, professionally, I'm an attorney. I took some time off, though, when we first moved to Shrewsbury, and I was home, and I got involved in the Spring Street PTO.
Yeah.
Which was a great experience. And my background, though, is in construction litigation. And so I thought when this opportunity came up to be involved in the Beale building project, what a great opportunity. I could bring kind of my experience as a, PTO parent, but also my background in construction litigation to the board. So I was thrilled when I was chosen to be a community member. And that was back in 2016.
Yeah.
It's been, and we're still going.
Yeah.
The project's it's almost closed out, but what an unbelievable experience, though, to work on that committee.
Mm-hmm.
With Jim, and it started. Dan Morgado
Yep.
initially was, and then Kevin took over during the course of the project. But I got to work with Joe Sawyer and Patrick Collins and Chris Girardi on the school side, but then also with Bob Cox and the people from the town, and just to see what a well-run, well-managed town we live in, and just how well coordinated. This project was. And I got to meet Sandy Frick as well, from the school committee while I was working on the project. And kind of when Beale started winding down, I was thinking, and Dale McGee was not seeking re-election. I thought, okay, this might be a good time to continue my involvement in a different capacity on school committee. But I felt, working on the Beale project really kind of was the impetus for me to take the next step.
It's really a great, I was a PTO, I served on the PTO at Floral for years, and it gives you a chance to build a network.
Yes.
You get to know a lot of other families, certainly. And, that's one of the things that I think is important when you're running for office in particular is having done work in the community and having other people who know, sort of what you're capable of, mm-hmm. but also how you approach it. I think I'm a big believer in tone and tenor matters. And when we were working on the effort to get the Sherwood Middle School passed back in 2010, one of the things that struck me was that sort of the tone and tenor of previous discussions had been sort of divisive, sort of mm-hmm. you're with us or against us. And I'm just a big believer in that you put information out there in a way that is easy for people to understand. Like, here's the crux of the decision we have to make.
Yeah.
And, allow people with good information, to be informed. And generally, I think that is why we have ended up having not only the effort to have some new schools built, but we're also a town which prizes the professionalism of the groups that we put in charge of that. And so you saw Sherwood, you've seen the library, you've seen Beale, projects that have been so well managed that they've come in, under budget, on time. Yes. That's sort of the hallmark of who we are. And I think, when somebody's running for office, that's an important piece to carry through, is that we are a well-run community, we're a well-managed community. And again, there's lots of opportunity to have different voices at the table and to think about new ways to do things. But there's also a lot of good that is in our community and the way that our boards work together and with the people who work in town and in the school system. And I think that's something that, I know for me personally, that matters a lot. And
absolutely.
I think it does to a lot of voters.
Yeah,
absolutely. The world looks different from every set of eyes. It's no two people can look at the same thing and see exactly, the same. And those perspectives are all valid and they all matter. And when we work in our community, we all have like the best interest of our entire community at heart, and being able to sit down with people that you may not agree with, and being able to like have that respectful dialogue and come to some type of consensus is so critical for a healthy community. Disagreements are okay, but it's at the end of the day that you can all work together. You can all look at each other with respect, and
right. We all live here,
right?
We all
Exactly.
wanna,
And we're all doing this because we love our town. So it's important, to have that, to be able to have that dialogue. So,
I agree.
Yeah.
Erin, what are some of the priorities that you have if elected as a school committee member? What are you most concerned about or looking forward to?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest issues facing the school community right now is definitely the student mental health issue. And I think, thankfully, due to the passage of the override last year, we'll be able to make some good investments. The school district, I think, the proposed budget calls for 2 additional adjustment counselors at the high school, an additional adjustment counselor at the middle school, a social worker position, 2 additional clinical coordinators, and then a director of clinical and mental health that will kind of be overarching across the district to coordinate all of the care and all of connections with outside agencies. And I think that should make a really immediate impact next year, and hopefully we can go from a reactive mode to a more proactive mode on those issues for kids as we emerge from the pandemic. I think additionally, academic learning loss is another issue that's going to, be front and foremost. I think the school district is doing a great job trying to look at different tools to assess kids and try to meet them where they are right now as they, emerge from some disruptions in their learning due to the pandemic. And the other issue I think that we're going to need to take a look at if I was elected would be the lack of vocational seats at Assabet. Unfortunately, due to some changes in some regulations, the community member school, the people that live in the communities that are members of the Assabet Collaborative get priority now. So there may not be seats for kids from Shrewsbury. And I think that's an important piece. There are kids that definitely need that type of education, and I think we just need to start looking at different options like partnerships with maybe universities, internships, job shadowing type programs. I think those would be really helpful ways to address that, and I think that needs to kind of stay front and foremost as well.
And I think it's there's a little bit of misinformation out there around sort of what happened on the vocational school piece, and it was there is a state law now that is looking at, in the past, the vocational schools could really come up with a criteria on what they, and because in the last, decade or so, a lot more students are looking to go to vocational schools who are also not necessarily looking to go into a trade right out of the school, but are also looking to go on to a 2 or 4 year school. And the good news is we have amazing vocational schools here in the Commonwealth, and they prepare you well, but there's a limited number of seats. Some of what was happening was some of the ways that they were scoring whether or not kids should be accepted really looked a lot at sort of grades or absenteeism, and sometimes again some of the reasons that kids are absent from school or they don't have good grades is not because the learning mode isn't necessarily the best for them. And in a vocational school we were doing sort of at Assabet, the 1 week in the classroom and the 1 week in the trade really gives you that blend of how you want to learn. And having owned a construction company, I can also say that, you can't just hand somebody a book and say, learn this. Like, a lot of us are learners by doing things, and that's where you excel at learning something where you might not have excelled as a student in a sort of typical classroom setting. And so the intent of the law was good, that, you need to sort of look at the broader than just sort of grades level and really look at the whole student. Because of that, when Assabet was first formed, Shrewsbury decided not to be a member of the district. They decided to tuition in students, which has meant that the members who paid the money to help build the school and sustain it and do that get priority. We made a smart decision for us at the time, but this is one of the unintended consequences now, is that because of the new way of establishing who should be accepted to go to the school, more of the member districts are able to send more students. And so we have to wait to see if there's any room left over. And Shrewsbury and Clinton, I think, are the two of the bigger school districts who are most disadvantaged by this. Again, good intention, and I think a good progress in terms of making sure that vocational school is accessible to more students. But for us, we have some work to do to figure out how to give access to the students who would truly benefit that. And, in the Commonwealth, we also are very much needing people to be coming into the trades.
Yes.
We do not have enough of a pipeline. And so it's also, when you look at the economy in Massachusetts as a whole, we need to find more ways to have more seats. Unfortunately, it's an expensive proposition to build a vocational school, but those conversations are going on in the state level. So I think it's good to be focused on that. And certainly the mental health piece, the budget just came out for us. We had to file our amendments, and I file every year money to give to Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services to do the youth mental health first aid training, which benefits the entirety of the Commonwealth, but to give teachers, people who interact with kids all the time, insight into how to identify early issues so that we can be referring kids for help earlier before the problem becomes so enormous in their life that they struggle in every aspect of it. So I think those are great things to focus on, and thank you for running. And Michelle, what about you? What's sort of the top of mind if you were to be elected? What are you focused on?
So I think that one of the biggest issues we're facing right now is affordability. We just had a lot of changes in our community that were really important, really critical things that, I think that really needed to happen for our community. But that made it challenging for a lot of people, especially seniors, retirees, some young families starting out. Our property taxes have gone up significantly in recent years. So identifying, tax relief options for seniors and making sure that those are communicated really clearly. I spoke to somebody last year who was a recent widow, and she couldn't afford the override. And she's like, I would love to support this, but I just can't. And I told her there's two right now on the books. There's two tax relief options for seniors in Shrewsbury. And I spoke to her about them. She had no idea that they existed, and she qualified for them. And that really struck me that, there are people in our community that really have needs, and there are options available for them, and they're not even aware of them. So, finding, increasing these compassionate services. I'm on the board at Shrewsbury Youth and Family Services, and there is a partnership with the town to offer mental health and support services in the community and in our schools, and increasing services for seniors, looking at options for young our kids, our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. It's there's a connection between like healthy activities and things like that and mental health. And when kids have those resources that they can go to, there are better outcomes for everybody. And kind of hand in hand with that is growing your town's economic base. Right now in Shrewsbury, the vast majority of the tax burden falls on homeowners. And if we really closely examine our zoning laws, work with business owners, work with landowners at underutilized buildings, and finding ways that we can increase our economic base in Shrewsbury to relieve that tax burden on homeowners. So
I think that's great, and I would love to respond because I think there's so much good in that, and we're out of time. I told you both it was going to happen, so Liz is fervently telling me we're out of time. So thank you both for being here. We'll include information on how to find out more about your candidacies, and best of luck on Tuesday, May 3rd. Make sure you go to vote, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I really appreciate all that you've done for our communities, and thank you for running.
Thank you.
But thank you for joining us today in Conversations with Hannah.